This is a loosely coupled show with James Hickey and Derek Comartin.
But yeah, that idea of having that, somehow having some state, some piece of data that drives your UI.
Yep.
But yeah, I
mean,
think it's like people have gone kind of way to the other side of things, especially with MVC. Maybe I don't know if that's what happened, where it was like we were doing things that way, and now we kind of shifted to the other side of the spectrum. Definitely, like you're talking about with SPAs. Now we're just like throwing data at clients, and like client, okay, you've got to figure everything out.
Exactly. It's like you client, you got to figure it out. Which
Yeah,
is the question I always have with that to people related to client, you got to figure it out is I ask people, does your app have some level of permit? Like, does it have permissions? Does it have different various authorization roles? Just of that nature. And then if it does, then when a user's logged into the system, if you're creating a spa and you have HTTP APIs on the front end, how are you determining what they can and cannot do? Like visually, like, do you just show everything as if they can do everything? And then when they try to do something and you make that call to the server and then the server throws up saying, hey, no, you can't do that? Or like, how do you conditionally show parts of the system that they can or cannot access? That's generally my question. Like, how do people do that? Because to me, it almost seems completely foreign without what I'm referring to. It's like the server telling the client specifically what they can and cannot do. Like, I've been doing this for 5 years. That's the only way I can think of it at this point.
well,
is the server driving the client.
I've seen cases, which in my experience is actually more common, which is sad, where you'll get a user model, put it on the client, and this, I mean, it's just JSON data ultimately, has some property that's like, are you an administrator? True.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only
Right?
way I
Like,
can possibly think of it. Like, how else would
yeah,
you possibly do that? Then you're doing, again, and that's logic that you're deciding, okay, like, is it just, maybe it's very simplistic, okay, that we know that. But then what happens when that rule changes, which is always the case? I mean, having these validation rules in two places, which is a whole different discussion, is just, okay, we allow, or there's more fine-grained, maybe a new role, some different access levels created to capture one specific action, and then the server's obviously going to implement that, and now the client has to.
Yeah, and you end up with these horrendous conditionals on the client, where it's like, are you an admin, or do you have this other permission?
Yeah.
Or are you viewing your own resource? Are you the user that you're doing this thing for? Or blah blah blah. Like, and then it's like, oh.
Yeah, I do think, like, when we talk about that too, and this isn't so much about Hypermedia, but it is a thing related to HTTP APIs, and we were talking to Nate about GraphQL, is like, if there is, if you're using, to me, like, in either or scenario, I pretty much feel like, just providing the client with like more useful information about what they can and cannot do is really helpful. But regardless of what you're doing, the enabler for me, a big one, is there's two things. Is one, that routes are like URIs are not fixed. So I often see questions like on Twitter and stuff about, okay, REST people or HTTP API people, two different things, but what is the proper way to construct a URI? And my answer is, who cares? Because if you're using Hypermedia, the URI it's opaque.
Yeah.
You're not constructing URIs. So you're not looking at documentation saying, oh, well, I want to call the change address for customer ID, whatever. And you're like, okay, so then the URI is going to be /customer / and then I'm going to pop in my ID of the customer that I've pulled down, and then some other, their address, I'm going to do a put to that or something. Like, you're not even thinking about that. Like the URI, you're not constructing URIs. URIs are, again, being passed down from the client. What you do care about, and what is static and that the server cannot change on you, is how you identify that URI. So you're going to have, like, just like you would with like in HTML, if you had like a link, maybe you have some ID property. If you're passing JSON down of, say, an array of collection of links, maybe that thing looks like you have a property called a rel, and that value, that string, that's going to be the thing that clients are looking for, right? That's the thing that's going to say, like, change customer address or something of that nature. But the URI, like the actual href that you might apply with that, the client doesn't care, like, it cares about it to use it, but what that thing is from request to request is irrelevant to it.
Yeah,
And the beauty with that, when we were talking about, like, the benefit for me that has been from that is, one, you don't get in the discussion is, oh, how do I construct a URI and what's our standard here? Two is, depending on where that thing lives and whether you get that right or where that needs to change over time, can change. Right? Because you can change, oh, we're going to move this resource from this service to this service, or from this route to this route, wherever the case may be, and you can do that.
Yeah, it's like versioning is one example I'm thinking of.
Yeah, it's ultimately, it's a way to and then to me it's I always say, my question is, like, related to versioning and HTTP versioning is just don't. It's kind of like event versioning in a kind of a similar way, which is you can augment a resource, like, meaning you can add data, right, to what the result is that from that HTTP API. And if you really need to drastically, like, you need to make a breaking change to it, then wherever people navigate to that route from, provide the new one, right? And deprecate the old one. Have some meaningful way that in your API you can say, okay, this API, like this, we're still providing this link to you, to this old deprecated API, but as of X, it's going away.
So in this case, you, like, implementation-wise, what you're saying is, let's say you have a link to do some action, and now there's a new way to do it. You wouldn't replace that one. You would keep it. You would add the new one, and then tell your users somehow in documentation or whatever that, hey, you need to start using this other one. But for a while, you're going to have access to both of those same actions, and then eventually remove.
Yeah, like, assuming it's actually not backwards compatible.
Yeah.
Assuming, like, maybe if it's, say it's a say it's just a get query, but, like, the actual structure is going to be drastically different, then yeah, you're going to have a completely different resource with a completely different link that you're going to pass down. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Loosely Coupled Show. If you did, please subscribe for more on software architecture and design.